Sometimes life just sucks, and sometimes it freaking rocks. We will discuss all the things from family and real estate to travel and just life in general. So take a seat, or don't, you do you, and welcome to the Lambadass Podcast. I'm so excited to have you back.
Yes.
The last time you were on here, we talked for so long, so I'm literally going to keep my phone right here so that we don't talk for 87 minutes. We didn't go 87 minutes last time. We only went about 40, but still, I try to keep it around 20 to 30 minutes. So one, we don't run out of content, and two, I know you have a life. So last time we talked trash TV. This time I want to dive in a little more serious. One thing that you and I both have in common is we are both step parents.
Yes, we are.
I have a stepson. Now, in my house, we don't use step. He's my son. He's my boy. This is my son. Jacob, I don't even think twice about it. Mm-hmm. But I know that our dynamics are very different. And I know that you came in at a different point in life mm-hmm. and stuff like that with your stepkids and stuff. So I kind of want you to give people whatever information you are willing to give about how this all came about, how you became a stepmom and all the things. And I mean, obviously by marrying your husband, you became a stepmom, but you know what I mean? And kind of how that went for you. And then we'll kind of talk about our differences if that's cool.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So start from the beginning.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll keep it as short as I can.
Please.
But I met my husband and we dated for about a year before I even met the kids. Mm-hmm. I was currently living on the East Coast and he lived here in California. So,
and how old were the kids at this time?
They were 9 and 11 when I met them.
When you met them?
When I met them. So they were 8 and 10 when I started dating Dan.
And do you think, I'm going to stop you throughout just to ask
of course.
Annoying questions. Do you think that waiting a year was the right amount of time?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think everybody's situation is different.
I agree.
Ours wasn't that simple.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for both the kids and for myself, mm-hmm. I felt like it was the best choice. I think Dan would have gone along with whatever I felt was right. But I think for me, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't stepping on anyone's toes or making anyone feel uncomfortable. I don't come from a blended family, so it's not something that I really had any background on.
Right.
So I just really wanted to tread lightly.
And Dan comes from a blended family.
Yes.
And does the kid's mom come from a blended family?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
But I think, I try to always think about others before myself. That can be a curse and a blessing, but
you're very good at that.
Thank you.
Of course.
But I really wanted to put them first and make sure that they knew I wasn't just, hi, I'm moving from the East Coast. Welcome to your new life where you have to deal with me every day. Right. So that was important to me. Mm-hmm. And once I did, I don't think I moved in with them until we were engaged.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I was living in Newport when we got engaged.
That's right.
So again, everybody's situation is different, but I felt like for me, that was the best way to go about it. And even that was a little, it's hard. It's a hard change. I was moving into their home that they had lived in with their parents together, right? So that was challenging and for them, but it was also really challenging for me. So,
sure.
Really took my time with that. And now they're 18 and 16. So I've been around for about 7 years with them.
Do you feel like it's gotten easier as they've gotten older?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think easier because I'm more comfortable with myself in this role.
So it's your maturity?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. More difficult because they went through their preteen and teenage years.
For sure. Like you jumped right in with
and
both feet right that
any
point.
Parent will understand who's had teenagers. So it's less about the blendedness and
mm-hmm.
more about just the time of life, I think.
I totally get it. So to give context of how different our situations are, I came into Jacob's life when he was 2. Mm-hmm. So it was funny. We were talking a while ago and I asked him, I said, do you ever remember your life without me? And he's like, no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like I kind of like that he doesn't remember a time without me per se. And then I married Sweetie Pie when Jacob was 4. So, and I mean, it was so cute. I mean, when Jacob was little, I'd go pick him up from his sitter and we'd be driving and he'd be like, can we get married? Like all little boys.
Oh my God,
ask.
so cute.
It was the cutest. and this is something that I've told you, but just to bring more, I guess, awareness to it. I've brought it up before, and I really want to say I do think that it helped my situation that my husband was never married to my stepson's mom.
Yes.
I think that helped.
I think that helps.
I also think that my stepson's mom is amazing. I love her. I remember when I first met Jacob, we were at my in-laws' house, and the funny thing is, now looking back, hindsight's always 20/20. I was invited to my now niece's first birthday, and my sister-in-law came up to me and said, I want you to know that I did not invite, Sarah is Jacob's mom. I did not invite Sarah or Jacob. And I said, okay. Like, first of all, it's weird that you're telling me that. Second of all, like, that's his cousin. Why would you not? And then she was like, if she brings him by, that's one thing. But I did not invite her. Well, naturally, he was, 2 at the time.
Right.
So he walks in, and mind you, I had been dating David for probably 3 months before I met Jacob. But David told me right off the bat, I knew I was going to marry you.
Oh.
He's like, I waited 3 months to introduce you to Jacob because I wanted you to feel comfortable with it. I was 18, y'all. Like, I didn't know my head from a hole in the ground.
Gosh.
I was 18. So I feel like that's so young anyways that I didn't care. And you know what's funny is he looked at me on our first date and he was like, do you know I have a kid? And I said, yes. And he goes, are you okay with that? And because I guess his last girlfriend was like not okay with this. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole nother situation. Yeah. And I said, I think so. And I said, how's the mom? And he goes, the mom? And I'm like, yeah, your kid's mom. Like, how is she? And he's like, oh, she's cool. And I'm like, all right. Like, if he would have been like, well, or, I think her being crazy would have scared me more.
Yes.
Okay.
I have
Thank God she's not.
I have a lot of friends who are now dating men with children, and a lot of them ask me, should I even open the door to that? Should I even be paying attention to that? I'm like, yes, the kids aren't necessarily the struggle. Ask them how they feel about their ex-spouse.
Yes, totally.
And I think another thing that you hit on is being so young and kind of not really understanding the situation. I have had so many people tell me, well, you knew what you were getting into. No, I did not.
I think that that's a cop-out because, okay, as a step-parent, you struggle. You struggle all the time.
As a parent, doesn't, yeah.
True. Very true. But so when I was 18, like you said, you don't realize the emotions that are going to come with it. And I can only imagine Sarah's emotions.
Right.
Like, who's this girl coming into my kid's life and how is she? And, I think the changing point, because when I first, let me backtrack. So the day of my niece's party, in walked Sarah and Jacob. She walked to the backyard and in the pool. No, Sarah's very quiet. We are very different. Very, very different. Down to like our height and hair color and eye color. Like, we're just very different. And she is the best soul. I love her. She's an amazing mom. She helped me get through some hard times when my brother was going through chemo and my birth children wanted to be with their brother. I called her up and I was like, hey, listen, this might seem weird, but my kids want to be with Jacob. Can I bring them over? I'm going to be at the hospital. She let my kids spend the night at her house. Oh. I've been at her house for 4th of July. Like, I love her as a person. On her birthday, I will text her. On Mother's Day, I really do my best to remember to reach out to her and tell her what a great mom she is because she was there. She was there for a lot of me growing up as well. I mean, we grew up together too.
Yeah.
So anyways, nobody introduced us.
I've still to this day never been introduced to.
What the fuck is the matter with these people? You guys. That is so, even if you don't like your significant other or the person, not your significant other, you obviously love your significant other. If you don't like the person that you had your children with, there still comes a point where both of those people should meet, whether you're male or female.
Oh, we've met.
We've
not been introduced.
I know, that's so rude.
Yeah.
But I felt like everybody was sitting back watching.
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen?
I know.
And it was the weirdest thing. She was over here by herself with her son and Sweetie Pie's family was over here and I was kind of like in the middle and David was like it was just awkward for everybody. And I'm like, this is bullshit. Now, I had to leave. My aunt was coming in. My aunt from London was coming up to visit us. And my mom was with me. And so my mom's like, we got to get going. And I'm like, this is so weird. So I went over to her and I was like, hi, my name's Lauren. I'm David's girlfriend. And I just want to say that you have a great son. And she was like, nice to meet you. And thank you. She's very quiet too. Mm-hmm. I'm very outgoing and in your face, and I probably annoy the shit out of her, but she never lets me feel that way. So thank you, Sarah, if you're listening to this. And I told Jacob, bye, sweetie. I'll see you later. And we bailed. And David followed me out, and he was just like, is everything okay? Oh my gosh. And I'm like, I think he just didn't know how to broach the situation. Yeah. And if his previous girlfriend before me was not a fan for her own reasons, do not get me wrong, for her own reasons, even though she was not a fan, I'm sure he was very worried at that moment. And so I went home and he came over later and I'm like, it was fine. I said, I found it more rude that nobody, if you weren't going to do it, your mom should have, your dad should have, your cousin should have, somebody should have, your sister who told me that she wasn't invited should have. And again, that wasn't the issue. She still showed up, and that was fine. But needless to say, I was bound and determined. I was like, you're not going to hate me. You're not allowed to hate me. And I think the pivotal moment in our relationship, and Sarah, if you are listening to this, you'll have to tell me if this was the same for you. When she realized I didn't want to be his mom. I like not being Jacob's mom. It's great. I never had to discipline him. I was always the shining star. His parents were great and he has an awesome stepdad too. So, but I felt that Jacob and I have a different connection, and maybe that's just me feeling the way that I feel and everybody feels that way with him.
I think that you were able to do that because of all of the people in this situation.
I agree.
There's a lot of blended families where that's not even an option, unfortunately. And I think it helps that you were there when he was younger. But again, people come in when they're younger and it's still a shit show. But
true.
I think when you're dealing with so many different personalities, you got lucky.
I agree. And Sweetie Pie is very good. And I don't necessarily need this, but he's very good about making it all about me. It's always been. I remember when we were going through marriage counseling, before we got married, we met with our pastor who was marrying us, and we did all these things and stuff. That was something that was really important to me. And I remember he looked at David and he goes, what happens when the choice needs to be made that it's your wife or your son? And David's like, that situation will never happen. And he said, no, you need to talk about this if it ever comes down to it. And David said, my wife will come before all of my children, all of them. And I just remember thinking, perfect. That's how it's supposed to be. My parents always told me, if it comes between us and your husband, you always choose your husband. You never pick us. And I will tell my children the same thing. Hey, one day you will leave your dad and you're supposed to. I want you to. And I just feel like that was very instrumental in how this worked. I know it was a little different for you.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, we could talk about this for so long. There's so many things about it. It's the parenting aspect of this marriage, right?
So let's go into the parenting first. And then if you're okay with it, I'll have you back and we'll go more into the marital aspect, because I do think that
it's a huge piece of the blended family.
Completely agree. But the parenting aspect, let's start there, because I was always allowed to tell Jacob what to do. He never looked at me and said, you're not my mom, don't tell me what to do. That was never that was never a thing for us. So I never had to worry about him telling me, you're not my mom, don't tell me to clean up my room. He was like, I never really had to yell at him though either. He was such a good kid. And I mean, if he did anything wrong, you could just be like, and he was good. So I know that my kid is also superhuman. So that's a little different too. But anyways, go ahead. So tell me from your perspective.
I think with disciplining, my husband wanted me to feel empowered to discipline the kids as needed. I mean, I nannied kids my whole young adulthood, and I always disciplined the kids. And I had one family I worked for that said, no, you're not allowed to discipline them. And I said, okay, then I quit. I'm here with them from 8 to 5:30. And if you think that I'm not going to discipline them when they're throwing a shoe at me, you're crazy. Right. So it's the same thing you and I have talked about, where if my kid's over at your house, I fully expect you to discipline them. Right. Yep. I just think as the adult, you keep them in line and you teach them what's right and wrong, and you teach them what behavior is okay. Right.
It takes a village.
So I've always been okay disciplining them. The struggle has, I think in my situation, was because it was such a toxic situation and the kids were in a very fragile age, being in that young but old enough to understand. It makes it hard for them. They don't know if they should expect you to parent or not. And I have times where they've told, my stepdaughter calls us all three her parents.
Yep.
And I find that really awesome because it tells me that I did a good job being a parent.
Yes.
And when she needed it.
Yep.
Right? There were times where I step back and I don't do anything because I know that she doesn't need it. She's getting it from her dad or she's getting it from her mom. But when it's just me and her or just me and my stepson, or I feel like they're not getting the parenting they need, I will step in and do it. Now, if I think back to some things that I wish I hadn't done, it would probably also be the disciplining.
Really?
So I'm happy that I did it. I'm glad that I did it because it's true to myself. And I think there were times when they needed it, but I wish I had been more filtered in the way I discipline them because every kid needs to be disciplined differently.
I agree.
And I started disciplining earlier than I didn't have as much background on how they individually needed to be disciplined. I disciplined them the way I would choose to discipline my biological children without any outside factors. And that created some friction.
Sure.
But again, I don't regret doing that because that's true to myself. I think that is the way to discipline the child. But when in a blended family, you have to take into consideration how they've been parented up until you met them.
True. And you were
And I
parenting
did
probably
not.
how you were parented.
Yes.
Or how you were, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Parented?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I didn't, it took me a long time to figure out that there's more than one right. And there's more than one right per child.
That's part of growing up though, too, though, friend.
Yeah.
I think that as you grow, you become a better human. So where are you guys at now? How's everything going? I mean,
I think we're good. I
Good.
don't know. It's always something, but again,
of course.
they're kids, and a lot of times I'll look at my husband and be like, "This isn't a step parenting issue. This is a parenting issue."
Oh, that is huge.
Yeah, and I'll be like, "This is me as a frustrated parent. This is not me as a frustrated step parent."
Yes.
When a kid leaves a dish out, it doesn't matter if you're their biological mom or not. You're gonna get annoyed.
Yes.
At the 15th time.
Yes.
So I'll sometimes look at him and be like, "Don't get mad at me. This is just me being frustrated with a teenager in my home."
Absolutely. And how is Dan towards that? Is he very...
Well, we've worked through a lot of it.
Sure.
But because I can communicate it that way, it's gotten better. But again, this is the whole marriage side of it. Like, you're dealing with a whole other set of emotions. I can't even imagine what it would be like to have to navigate your kids, their mom, your wife, your feelings. It's a lot on your plate.
Plus your two kids that you're
Yeah.
raising, like,
Right.
because you guys they have 4 children total, 2 bio, and then obviously 2 stepchildren. But I do think that you're so right.
And that's the other thing when I was so focused on how I was reacting and how I was handling things. And I didn't necessarily in the beginning stop and think, what does this feel like as a biological parent? And once I started doing that, I think it helped me back off a little bit as needed.
That's so good because up until this moment right now, and I've been married to Sweetie Pie for 20 years, I don't think that I ever did either.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was difficult. I'm sure it was really difficult because, they were so young when they had Jacob that it wasn't just them two. It wasn't just the 2 parents, but you had grandparents involved. And might I add, like David's family and Sarah's family, like they played bunco together, like they were their friends. And, when it didn't work out with the kids, it's like, now what do? They have this grandkid together. And it was just a shit show that led into an avenue of issues amongst them. But I was hell-bent and determined to not let the grandparent issues amongst the grandparents become issues amongst the people that were raising him. So they were always kind. They were always respectful. I would see them at Jacob's games. I remember Sarah's dad. He's since passed. But he would come and tell me, "You're so beautiful and you're such a great mom. I see you with your kids and I see what a great mom you are." He would tell me, as Jacob got older, what a good mom I was. And I just remember feeling so good by that. Like, it was just like, thank you for noticing.
Yeah.
So I think that
That's a huge thing as a step parent. You just want it to be acknowledged and noticed. A lot of the times it goes unnoticed, right?
Yes.
I talk about this a lot with Dan because as a step parent, I don't get the unconditional love from the children that he gets. And he needs to understand it from that perspective, right? Because as a biological parent, your kid's going to love you no matter what.
Yes.
Clearly.
Yes.
They're going to love you through whatever it is, right? Or at least it may not look the same way throughout time, depending on what you do as a parent, right? But I don't get that just out the bat, right?
You're right.
And so there was a lot of time where I felt like I was working for it, and now I feel like I'm not. I'm just being me, and if it's gonna come, it's gonna come, right? Like I have gone through phases where me and the stepkids all say "I love you" to each other. We go through phases where we don't, but again, it's not about what I'm getting back from them because I've taken myself out of that, right? It's not about what am I gonna do to get that. I'm just gonna be me and make sure that Dan's good with everything.
Because at the end of the day, it is the two of you.
Well, that and I can't force a kid to love me the way that they're going to love their mom. And I'm not looking for that.
True.
Right.
And that is hard for me because I do love Jacob. Like he is my own. I mean, it's funny. Connor told me on Mother's Day, was it Mother's Day this year? Maybe it was Father's Day. I don't even know how it came up. And he says, Mom, I forget that you didn't have Jacob.
Oh.
And it made me really choked up because I looked at him and I said, I worked really hard at that.
Yeah.
And I need you to know, and I need this to be known by anybody listening. I do feel that my son loves me unconditionally. I feel like I could divorce his dad and he would still be like, so when are we getting together for dinner? Yeah. Like, I do feel that unconditional love from Jacob, but I think it also helped that I met him at such a young age.
Yes.
And I also think it helped that because he was so little and David wasn't dating anybody and he wasn't married to his mom, so he could show Jacob, like, you know what I'm saying? Like David was so young too, that he didn't have the emotions of going through a divorce or worrying about stuff like that. He didn't have that on his plate.
Yeah.
So his attention was all towards me, and Jake got to see that as an example. So it's like, oh, dad loves her. Me too. And I think it just grew. And now I would die for him. I would totally take a bullet for that. But when I die, he gets a quarter of everything. It's not like, oh, well, my kids get a third, but David's kids get a quarter. No, it is split 4 ways, period.
And I agree with that. And even though it may look different at times, it's the same thing, right? Like I get just as frustrated with my stepkids as I would with my biological kids, and I love them the same way too. I would never treat them differently because of that, and I think they know that. I think they know that I have their back.
Yes.
I think they know that I'm going to help them when they ask for help, right? And that to me is all you can do.
And you always have their best interest at heart.
Absolutely.
I mean, even from the in-depth conversations that you and I have had, like, you've always come from a place of wanting to do what is best for the kids. Always. Whether it was right or wrong, it's always been from the heart of wanting what's best for the kids. Yeah. And I will say that I know that not every step-son, step-parent relationship is like even like ours, right? Like there might be people where it's like, I will never love my stepmom or I will never love my stepdad. And that is okay. If somebody is toxic to you or you just don't have that love for that person, I need it to be known that that's totally okay. Even if the kids are little, oh, that scared me. I thought there was a bug on my arm. It was just the cord. If you don't have that relationship with those kids or with those parents, I think that it needs to be normalized that's okay.
Yes,
that
absolutely.
is okay. It's okay to not love your stepkids. What's not okay is to be mean.
Yes.
And it is not okay to be rude or act out or immature towards your stepchildren because you're the adult. Grow the fuck up.
Yes.
Like really.
The number one thing across all boards in blended families is not putting the kids in the middle of things. So 99% of the time that a kid is put in the middle, it's because one of the parents can't figure out their own emotions.
Totally agree.
And they're putting it on their child, which is so unhealthy. And
that we can agree on for sure.
Yes. And I think no matter what I do, that's at the core. There are times that I screw up.
Of course.
Obviously, there are times that I say things I shouldn't say or bring things up that I shouldn't bring up.
You're going to do that as a bio mom.
Exactly. But I think the people who can't understand that their adult emotions aren't supposed to be on their child are the ones who are going to have the biggest issues in step parenting. And that's whether or not the kid's 2, 5, 18, whatever it may be, even when they're adults, right? They still shouldn't be in the middle of it.
Never. And I do think that therapy is there for a reason. And people who do need to voice, because adult emotions are real. Like, I totally want to validate that. But like, you have to learn to cope. And if you can't cope, then talking to somebody who is,
somewhere you can.
Yes, somebody who's more educated, somebody who specializes in that, in my opinion, is the best thing to do.
Yeah, I agree.
I love you again for being here. Thank you so much for talking all about this. I can't wait to have you back next month so we can talk more about all the marital stuff that goes into it.
Yes.
So be prepared.
I will.
All right, girlfriend.
All right.
Thanks.
Love you.
Love you,
Bye.
babe.